What's up, party people? Okay, I'm all excited because it is my Friday right now when I'm recording this. I don't know what day it is for you, but I hope you will have a good weekend or you just had a good weekend. So today, my chaotic ADD, let me make sure this isn't too loud because that really irritated me on my last video. Today, my chaotic ADD has been telling me to tell you about this argument I had with my friends, my buddies, about whether Expedition 33 is considered as an indie game or not. Apparently this was a huge topic online back when the Game Awards came on. I never pay attention to things like E3, and actually E3 doesn't exist anymore, does it? RIP. Or the Gamer Awards. I just don't. I don't know why. I just kind of do things at my own pace, so I was kind of left out of all of this, the arguments of it, so everything I'm reading to you is my opinion, and I want to know what you think. Or if my friend is the one in the right. I'll be showing you what I can, but mostly I'm just going to be reading it to you and putting funny pictures of who's speaking on the screen. Alrighty, so before we fully dive in, a little context is needed in this situation so you can understand why me and my friends are talking about this, who's coming from where, and so on. So, me and my friends have been doing a video game club for almost a year now, where like we have a theme and we all make picks if we want to play that theme, and then we all vote on the games that we want to play. And back in what was in November, December, Expedition 33 won. Now the hope is that we usually get to these within the month, but obviously with the holidays and my friends' bitch asses, they have put off this topic. So we start off with our main character here, Kyle, the bane of my existence. And maybe I'm inspired by watching Birdman. I'm learning some things from him from the last video I did on his video, but I'm going to put a little indicator on the screen here if this person generally favors Expedition 33 or doesn't favor it. So Kyle announces on the 2nd of March to us, I'm going to aim to have the discussion for Expedition 33 at the end of this month. Then my sister, her name is Rachel, says, this is going to be a very interesting discussion. Can I make the PowerPoint? Now usually Kyle makes the PowerPoint on these things, and we can just sense he's already super disinterested in this game. So Ariana, another girl in our group, says, I don't mind. And my sister says, I love making PowerPoints, blah, blah, blah. Then we enter a fourth person into the mix, my friend Lucas, who says, I will try to catch up, but don't let me stop you. Lucas made it very clear, very early on, that he did not like the combat, that he was getting frustrated with it, and and it would be hard for him to continue. So we already know that he got to, like, the first mini-boss and kind of, like, threw in the towel. Which, like, that's fine. You know, this game isn't for everyone. I got very frustrated with the combat as well, and I usually typically love combat-heavy games like Kena, Bridge of Spirits. I'm not good enough for Dark Souls, okay? I'm gonna be real. I'm not. But I thought I generally enjoyed it myself. Anyway, who cares about me? My sister says, in response to Lucas, I don't think E33 will be your favorite game by any means, but if you can get into it, there's a lot to appreciate. I kind of understand because I'm struggling to consistently play this game. I still haven't finished it, but I'm close. When I'm playing it, I really like it, but when I put it down, I'm like, I'll get back to it at some point. Now, this is pretty funny because my sister has been so obsessed with the soundtrack of this game that she is playing it everywhere. And I'm singing it, but, like, you know, putting my dog's name into it and singing it to him as I usually do. And she's falling in love with, like, my sister is very... very bougie, I would say. So she's dug into, like, the meaning of the songs and, like, and how they found the music composer and, like, all these cool little stories about it, which is really neat. And Lucas says, different strokes for different folks. One of my other friends says it's one of the greatest games they've ever played. Meanwhile, they gave up on Outer Wilds. And Outer Wilds was the last game that our video game club played. And while I didn't partake in that game myself at the time, I did enjoy listening to them discuss it. I did show up for the meeting that they had. I just shut up and was eating french fries and listened to them play it, talk about it. And I was like, man, I low-key wish that I got into Outer Wilds. As frustrating as it seemed to have been to them at certain times, they really enjoyed it. But Lucas and Kyle are definitely more of, like, Outer Wilds people, and we play Lethal Company together, and honestly Lucas kills it at Lethal Company. I don't know how, because that game, that stupid multiplayer like streamer bait game, is so easy to die in that somehow he's good at it. I don't know. My sister, who very clearly wants to keep talking about this, says, yeah, those are very two different experiences, lol. Although I can appreciate any game that has a lot of love and care put into it, which in my subjective opinion feels true for both. And then enters Kyle. Kyle. He says, yeah, you can make the PowerPoint. I don't know if it's still around, but I had the template for one. Oh yeah, and then Ari sent him the template, blah, blah, blah. And then Kyle says, it's not directly tied to the game itself, but it might be interesting to talk about how it won Game of the Year and our thoughts on the other nominees and how these games compare to E33. Now, the first thing you want to know about my buddy Kyle is that dude loves to fight as much as I do. And it's especially funny because my name is Kyla and he's Kyle. So, of course, we can't just have a nice discussion about the game. It hasn't happened yet. The meeting hasn't happened yet. I'll record it if you guys want me to. But of course he has to insert arguments into this discussion before it even happens. He said, but not everyone has played any of the other Game of the Year nominees, so it might be better to skip that. First of all, thank you for assuming, Kyle, that I haven't played the other game nominees. Turns out I hadn't, but I low-key want to try Silksong someday. It does look good. I'm not the biggest fan of like platformers. He really loves like a good platformer. My sister says Kyle just wants to talk about Silksong. He puts in some Silksong gifs that say yes, and blah blah blah. My sister said, I haven't played any of the other 2025 Game of the Year nominees, and I expect E33 will give us a lot to discuss in and of itself, so I'll leave the 2025 Game Awards to y'all's discretion, lol. I expect Kyle will write us a dissertation about how Silksong should have won, laughy face. Ariana says, if I recall correctly, even the developers were chill with the rankings because they know their game pisses people off. And Rachel said, it's already huge to be nominated, I'm sure. I don't think anyone expected E33 not win though, and she's absolutely right. Like, as soon as this was announced early last year and we all got the visuals and we all were already hearing great things, we all knew that it would probably win Game of the Year, and it did. Kyle said, which I reacted to with a middle finger emoji and a laughing emoji, I haven't played E33 yet, so I'm not going to comment on who should have won Game of the Year. The only one I will say is that there should have been no way E33 was classified as an indie game. I don't care how much I end up loving the game, it is just ridiculous to say it is indie. And yeah, I did this. And Rachel says, I didn't know anyone considered E33 to be an indie game. My sister's dumb and out of the loop, like even more than I am, if you can believe it. She says, I just looked it up for context and see it's a pretty heavily debated topic for E33. Saw a comment that suggested calling E33 an indie game when it might not really fit that description is a great way to get people talking about it, which is an interesting point. Nothing like a bit of light controversy to market your game. This reminds me of the whole intelligence wisdom thing I talked about recently. Me and my sister are very much wisdom leaning, even though we might be a little bit dumb at times. But I think that's a good point. That could definitely be the truth. I put in a fight of a little kid who looks like he's ready to square up. A gif of like a kid like going like that's it, like tearing off his like vest. He has a vest on, he tears the vest off, it looks like he's gonna fight. And Kyle says, yeah, it was heavily debated because it was nominated for Best Indie Game at the Game Awards and won that category, which made me mad. And he's misspelled the word made, so it says which mad me mad. And Ari says, ahem, made cough cough. And we laughing emoji react to it. And Kyle says, look, I'm so mad I'm turning other words into the word mad. There were just other games in the indie space that really deserve some recognition, like Silksong, Hades 2, and Blueprints. I would have rather saw one of those games win that category. Yeah, I would have rather saw one of those games win that category. And I said, Kyle, you're not going to win this fight. It's an indie game, deal with it. Which my sister puts this gif, and I put this gif. I'm about to go all Alyssa Edwards on your Coco Montrese ass. Lucas says it's the gold blue dress all over again. Kyle, here's where the real fight starts, okay? Kyle says, how would you define what makes an indie game studio? The biggest problem is that award shows don't define it, and definitions between people can wildly vary. It used to mean that it was published independently, but that definition has long passed from being true. The normal metrics are How much funding did the team have? How big is the team that worked on it? And what publisher is backing them? And how is the publisher contributing? I just thought of a whole new argument just reading that alone. Sure, maybe back in the day, you know, when we had PS1 graphics, it was easy to pop an indie developer as just a 1 or maybe 2-person passion project. But with the advancements in graphics and, you know, all the game mechanics we've developed over the years, I think we should modernize personally. Anyway, he continues. All we know about the budget is that it was less than 10 million. While much less than a AAA game is still very high when compared to other indie games, and we can assume that a decent chunk of that funding came from their publisher, Kepler Interactive, which I thought it was Sandfall Interactive, but whatever. The core team that worked on it was 32 people, which is small enough that you could make an argument that they are just a large indie team until you take into account that they outsourced a lot of the game animation out, so the amount of people who worked on it is more than just the people within the studio. What the Game Awards needs to do is make a reasonable line in the sand about what metrics makes something indie or not, because E33 had way more funding and support than pretty much any other game most people actually consider to be indie. Now, for a fuckhead ass, for my argumentative friend Kyle, he does actually make some good points here that maybe these things should be drawn a line in. If you give a fuck this much about the Gamer Awards, I don't. But I like to fight. So I threw in after this. He continues, after putting the thanks for coming to my TED Talk gif, he says, did some more digging and Hades 2 actually had a higher budget, but they self-published their games and had a smaller team around 20 to 25 people. Oh wow, that's a whole 10 or 8 or 8 to 10 people less. Wow, I'm so impressed. And the only thing that was outsourced for Hades 2 that we know of was the animated launch trailer. Silksong was made by 3 people but had a large budget and production time because the success of Hollow Knight allowed them to take as much time and spend as much money as they wanted. Which again, to me, he's blurring the lines there on what an indie game is, because again, Silksong is a sequel, so the rules change a little bit, so maybe drawing a line in the sand isn't a great idea. My sister says, I only consider a game to be indie if it was made by one sweaty nerd in the basement of their home working with a budget of $25 and a Happy Meal. But I'm a purist in these matters, she said. Clearly she's trolling. She doesn't actually believe it just takes one dev. But she likes to fight, but she likes to just argue dumb things sometimes. She's funny. And so I said, I'm very pro Humble Beginning Studios. They started off with free assets in the game engine, I think it was Unreal, of course, and spent years just learning it. They started off very grassroots. So to me, even though the game quality went up to a AA value over 6 years, it's still an indie game. It's not their fault they did a good job getting investors and good money to put in the game, as well as taking 6 years to develop the game that they love. If that's not indie soul, then I don't know what is. Lucas says, that sounds like they sold out. Kyle says, no, the founder of Sandfall Interactive, the studio that made E33, literally is a former Ubisoft developer. So fucking what, Kyle? Kyle, having your studio's first game have that much support and funding is not grassroots. And Lucas said, look, I'm definitely not knowledgeable on this, but just from initial impressions, I never would have guessed that anyone would have considered this an indie game. What exactly is indie about this? It's certainly not the AA graphics and story. The gameplay loop doesn't seem innovative or different.
Really?
And this is just, I love my friends. I love you. Please don't find my channel. But like, you're a pleb. You can't just look at a game and define what it is off of, you're judging a book by its cover. Just because it looks impressive doesn't mean it doesn't have like that indie soul and indie heart in it. Kyle replies to me where I said, if that's not indie soul, then I don't know what is. He said, this line is what the Game Award does now, and it is stupid. If you can make the argument of any game having a soul of an indie, even though every level of production does not indicate that it should be considered one, then they can put whatever they want into that indie category, which like I do get what he's saying to a degree, right? We have these categories for a reason. We should not muddy the waters too much, otherwise then what's the point of having the categories? Sure, there's a small point to be had there. And I said, I mean, that's not true. There are plenty of games AA and AAA that don't fall into that category. To me, it just sounds like gatekeeping a category just because they were successful at exceeding indie expectations. And for me, I definitely felt some janky indie soul in Expedition 33. I wish I wrote down those times because I didn't think it would be important, but there were a few times I was like, oh, there's the indie. It's being a little, you know, when like a game is like a little goofy and you're like, yeah, it's an indie game. It did happen in that game, believe it or not. As pretty and polished as it looks, it got the little bit of jank in there. And I said, just because it's pretty and had funding doesn't mean it's any less deserving of its grassroots. My sister says, honestly, can you even call your game an indie if you did not develop it on a computer you built yourself using sticks and mud? That way you can use the $25 USD for marketing and the Happy Meal for team morale. The fucking audacity, she said. Oh my god. Lucas says, I feel like the spirit of an indie game also harkens to something deeper. Indie games get to challenge the norm. They aren't held down by corporate interests. They get to make their own rules, take risks, and do things differently. I said, lol, but by that definition then, so many indie games would get excluded. It's not often it's one guy making these. A small studio of 10 to 30 is normal these days. Like by your definition, Rachel, even Mugenics wouldn't be an indie game when it's made by hand by two guys. I felt like Expedition 33 had the spirit of an indie game and it challenged the norm. Even for a turn-based RPG, it did a lot differently. Y'all just mad that Silk Song didn't win. Now, in case you're unfamiliar with me, I'm a dumb bitch, and I didn't realize my sister was like joking. Obviously, the sticks and mud, she's joking, right? I get that, but like, I'm more referring to her first comment about this, and she's like, she points out how dumb I'm being. She's like, yes, I was very clearly being serious about what I consider to be an indie game. Thank you guys for taking me seriously for once in your lives. And I said, lol, bitch, I'm just in all fight mode now. And Ari said, she replied to me saying, y'all just mad that Silk Song didn't win. Ariana said, to be fair, no one was denying that. That's right, Ariana. And her husband, my best buddy Ed, played the fuck out of Silk Song. Had a huge discussion about it in my Discord with Kyle. They both like gooned over it for hours, days. And she's seen how great the game is. So even she saw how great the game is and still is like, yeah, to be fair, no one was denying that. So Lucas comes back in the convo and he's like, honest question, what exactly does it do differently? I only played up to the first boss and it seems like a pretty standard turn-based combat. Does the gameplay change much beyond the first act? I mean, is dodging and parrying all that innovative? Ariana said, there are other things. Somewhat later, the game introduces different types of counters that involve the whole party, jump counters along with gradients and gradient counters. Jump counters, if successful, get a counter from the whole party, and if there are multiple jumps in a single combo, there are opportunities for multiple counters in a single turn. Gradient counters, you don't have to parry every blow to get a successful counter. Instead, you only need to parry the gradient attack to get a success, which is usually the last hit in the combo. Not sure if this answers the question or not. Then again, I think a lot of games use a different mashup of mechanics that have been used elsewhere. Certain enemies like petanques have different weaknesses that you have to feel out because each petanque is different, and if you don't get the right strategy and defeat it within a certain number of turns, it runs away. Similar to other RPGs, I'm sure you can think of examples. She continues, something I found a little bit annoying but others might like is each character does combat differently or gets combat bonuses in different ways. For example, Mael's stances, Luna's stains, Gustav's charges, so each new character introduction came with a tutorial on how to play them. Mimes, on the other hand, use the same two-hand combos. Once you fought one and learned how to counter them, it will be the same for every single one after. Only difference being how much health they have and how long it takes to break down the barrier. My sister says, E33 does a lot of cool and interesting things, like what Arya is describing above with the combat, and also with acquiring and applying skills to the characters, Pictos. Of course, the story is incredible and immersive and makes you want to replay the game to see it from a different perspective once you learn certain things. However, I wouldn't consider it to be overall much different from your standard, mostly linear, turn-based action RPG, especially coming from a place of just having experienced games like Outer Wilds and Who's Lila. It is extremely well done though, and more than deserving of the praise that it gets. I said, I agree with those, and the fact that you can dodge in turn-based is something I'll always want in my turn-based games now. I'm even a bit upset that BG3 doesn't have it now because it's super big, nice when you get it right. I don't think every indie game has to break new ground with new mechanics and such to be an indie game. I think the vibe is what matters a lot. Like Cult of the Lamb, I'm not a big roguelike player, but I really enjoyed how it did things like a lot of roguelikes, but breaking it up into different levels with different enemies helped it feel less monotonous. And for me, in E33, each character's skill tree felt diverse enough to make the game stand out. You could go full fire build for Lude or Earth or straight up healer. A lot of RPGs don't do that. I feel like you're usually given a set character with a oh fuck, with a set of defined skills is what I meant. I could go on. I have my qualms about E33, and it is nowhere near a perfect game, and I already gave up on the new game plus because it is so grindy, but I love it overall. Kyle then says dodging in turn-based games is not new, it just isn't used all the same. I think the Mario RPGs use it. It is a category for an awards show. There inherently needs to be gatekeeping to prevent games that don't belong in that category from being there, and that is why it being indie is even a debate, because they refuse to define it. If you are going to have a category, you need to be able to definitely say that a game should be in that category without question. No one is going to question that E33 should be nominated and potentially win Best RPG because by definition, it is an RPG. The fact that there was such discourse about if it was indie or not should automatically call into question if it should be nominated for that category in the first place. He continues, I agree with some of the ideas Lucas is saying, but that isn't a defined metric and still leaves room for debate on it if it should be there or not. And there are also plenty of RPGs that have very diverse skill tree choices. Dragon Quest has been doing it for a really long time, just not in every entry. I'm pretty sure that most of the actual RPG elements in E33 are not new in any way. It is just one of the few games that broke out into the mainstream that use them. Also, the dodge action exists in BG3, you just aren't using it. Plus, if you have a character with high AC, the enemies have a higher chance of missing, which can be interpreted as your character dodging. And I said, what? Oh, I said, oh, armor class, lol. I was like, I don't know, I still disagree. As soon as I heard it was from a small unknown studio, I thought indie. And this is the only time I've seen such discourse over it. Again, because I don't look for it, right? Everyone in my gaming circle seems to accept it as an indie game. And I think by how I explained it, I stand by it. And he says, there is literally a primary action called dodge. He's talking about BG3. Ari then says, something I haven't seen in other games that allow pairing is certain gestural enemies will deliberately fake you out. I hated those. Yes, the fake out for the dodges in this game was a bitch. I think we can all agree on that. And I said, I don't think so. Are you thinking of disengage maybe, where you don't trigger opportunity attacks and you flee? I'm talking about BG3. And he says, oh damn, I looked it up. I assume the dodge action is there because it uses the D&D 5e rules, which I play actual D&D with, but I guess they decided to leave that action out of the game. That's my bad. I play actual D&D too, Kyle, but I don't like sprinkle that around in our conversation here to make myself seem smart. I love dunking on him, man. And I said, lol, it's okay. I was going to be really upset at myself if I was just missing it this whole time. And he says, but I would still argue that AC covers dodging, especially if you're playing a class like Monk. Obviously, duh. By the way, Drunk Monk is the funnest run I ever had in BG3. Holy shit. Like, I know, you probably are like, I know what to expect there. That sounds like a game that I know how it's gonna go, but it's great. I love it. Anyway, Kyle replied to something I said, which said, I don't know, I still disagree. As soon as I heard it was a small unknown studio, that part, he says, of course they are unknown. It was their first game. That's not an argument for it being indie. That would be covered in the debut game category, which it was in and won. Actually, it was an award for best indie game, so I don't think it should have won that either. Also, there was a ton of discourse about it. You probably didn't hear about it because you only got into the game after the Game Awards were over for a while. And while you guys play video games, the only person I know actively paid attention to some of the Game Awards news and results in greater detail is Dan, another friend in our group who, she's not in the video game club, but she is awesome. That pissed me off what Kyle said, because I actually didn't play Expedition 33 until this year, till January, because I didn't have the money for it. I was legit like me, and my finances were bad. Didn't have job. Just got a job in February again. Bleh. I decided to splurge on it because it was on sale after winning Game of the Year, which is a very cool thing the devs did, I think. To include the DLC and a discount price, I wanted to support them. And because I tried to play it on my sister's Steam Deck, and it was absolute ass. It was bad graphics, it was choppy. So I was like, look, I'm just gonna buy this on the PS5 because I think this is going to be one that we play and we replay and we replay. So this is wrapping up soon. I didn't think this would take 27 minutes to talk about. I'm sorry, but I hope it's entertaining you. Ariana says, as a former indie developer, one thing I can say is that an RPG is one of the most difficult genres for a small team to produce, much less see the light of day. One of the most impressive things I learned about the studio was that many of their developers had no background in game development and had to learn from scratch. In doing so, they were able to utilize their talents to enrich the game in their own way. And my sister said, I don't think I've ever actually watched a Game Awards. And yeah, I haven't either because I don't fucking care. I've seen the clips. I've seen the clips, obviously, of Astrobots winning, of BG3 winning, and of the Larian Studios BG3 guy, like, tipping his hat to the Expedition 33 people in their acceptance speech. That's great. I don't feel personal need to watch them though. I said, I've been wanting to play it since it came out. I didn't hear about any of this because I don't care to keep up. And yeah, I actually don't care about the Game Awards, so that's true. Like, it's cool they won, but outside of that, I just game at my own pace and budget. And then the conversation is kind of done from there. So we are pretty much all done on that. Now, what I think about Expedition 33, I don't know if I want to spoil it for you. Should I add spoilers in here? Anyway, I think overall, the combat can be a bit grindy. Combat can be very fun though, because I thought it was fun to go in between Lune's stains. Actually, hers was the hardest one to get into for me, but once I understood it, I was like, okay, cool, I can use stains to make bigger attacks, whatever. But Mael's stances, great. I had a great system for beating down mofos. Gustav has a great set of skills that are just absolutely can beat down if you hit them right, if they're charged enough. Verso was pretty typical, like, sword master, like regular just combat guy, but he still was very powerful. I ended up using his break attack a lot after I hit them with fire. I think I had something. I love when a game does this thing where you can make your own builds, and then your own builds can play off of each other's characters. So like, I'd set them on fire so that Mael would get something out of it, and then I could put her in Virtuoso Stance, which does like 200 damage on her next hit. Like, it's fun for me when a game does that, and that's what I felt like was different about this as an RPG, because I played like Persona, I played like a few other like RPGs and JRPGs, and that didn't really do that. Like, sure, Joker has a bunch of attacks because he has multiple personas, but like you can't really pick and choose too much of the other characters and what their attacks are. Now you can gain new attacks and you have to throw out old ones because you can only hold so many in that game. But yeah, I just felt like it, you know, each character having their own. Oh, and Ciel with the tarot cards thing, that one was a little hard to like get a feel of as well, but once you did, she was a heavy fucking hitter for sure. And I love that the game did that. Now, story wise, I appreciated that it stuck within its own bubble. I think there's been a lot of rhetoric in the past few years about games kind of bending the knee and submitting to current culture for some reason, when video games don't have to be about that. They should be contained in their own world. They should have a story that just functions for their own purpose, and it doesn't need to serve anyone. I don't need it to like serve anyone or anything. And people will probably complain like, oh, but there was only white people in it for the most part. Well, but they were French. So am I going to sit here and be like, oh, none of them were Americans? That's as dumb as me saying that. So like, I really appreciated that it did that, but overall I felt the story was kind of lacking. That kind of storyline, how do I say this without spoiling it, where everything kind of doesn't matter in the end, kind of just, I don't really like that. I don't really like that. So do with that what you will. I want to know what you think about this. Is it an indie game to you? Have you argued with your friends about this? What arguments can you bring to the table? Because my discussion is coming up soon, and I'm sure Kyle's gonna still talk about it even though we've already talked about it. Anyway, thank you for hanging out with me while we talk about this. I was gonna show you some of my art that I've been working on the past few weeks, but this is already a little bit long, so I'll just do it next time. Thanks for hanging with me and whatever my chaotic ADD is choosing for the day, and see you next time. Bye bye.